In the case of Change Healthcare, and this is all public information, it was something like $20 million in terms of the ransom that was paid, right? And the problem was that in that situation, they paid one affiliate, which is one of the entities involved in the actual compromise. But then there was another affiliate that was like, wait a minute, we didn't get our cut because there were two parties involved. And now the question is, are you going to pay them also? But the other aspect is, okay, we have the data, but you have to pay us a certain amount for us not to release it. And you're hoping in some respects that there's honor amongst thieves, because if there isn't,
you're trusting the thieves.
Well, in some respects,
ripped you off.
There's a lot of trust involved, because if they don't act with integrity, at least in these extortions, then their industry takes a hit.
So it's their own industry. They have a moral code of ethics.
Right. So there's
cyber.
This is but this goes back to cops and robbers since the beginning of time, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to really believe the threat if they don't follow through with the threat? But how are you going to believe the protection if they don't follow through with the protection? Right? This is more related to the mob days, is more recent organized crime. But this is organized crime also.
Yeah.
So the threat and the protection are just as important.
Welcome to Beyond the Bones. I'm your host, Peter DeNoble. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I am very honored to have as a guest today a good friend and also a cybersecurity expert, works for the largest cybersecurity firm in the world, and has done a lot of great work in the space. And I'll let you kind of like give more details about your background, but I'm really happy that we finally got this done.
I know, right? Finally.
We finally got you on here. So without further ado, tell me more about the world of cybersecurity to date.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about. So I wanted to I want to just jump in where, you feel like is the hottest button topics today.
Yeah. So thanks, man. This has definitely been a long time coming, and I love not only the work you do, but the opportunity to share these lessons, hopefully, that'll help people. I work with the largest cybersecurity company in the world, and the thing that I do with them is a lot of incident response. So I find myself in some very tricky situations, but the key here is making sure that everybody's safe and protected. What's happening in cyber? Well, AI is the top of mind for everybody, but the trick with cybersecurity is how quickly people are being compromised, and also how much we have to be aware of what's going on in an organization, with our people, with our technology. It just seems overwhelming for a lot of people. But, we can talk about how we don't make it overwhelming,
Well, cybersecurity, it's almost like I feel like we all watch the news every day or every week. There's always another big story about some enormous breach.
Yep.
Where I'm sure, my or your, even your personal information's out there. And it's like, it's almost so big that like, you don't even know what to do. Mm-hmm. You just sort of like, it almost becomes, routine news now. You don't even think to do anything in particular. Is there something that we should be worried about, or you just let it go? I mean, I just let it go, but I mean, what should I be? Is there action items that we should think about here?
Well, I like to talk in threes. It's probably more digestible to do things that way. And also my mind goes in all the places. So I feel like talking in threes is helpful. Okay. Think of the fact that we all have to act. We all have to act every day in making sure that we're safe. So let's use that acronym, ACT. What are the awareness things that we should be doing? How much should we be listening to the news? Maybe not obsessing about the news, but we should be listening to when there's a big breach with a hospital. What was the nature of the breach? And are we susceptible to that? So, for example, a big thing that's happening is there's people calling your front desk or your help desk, and they're saying, hey, look, we need to change your password. And inevitably, whether it's casinos, whether it's healthcare, there is a process in what they call social engineering that a hacker calls, and next thing you know, they're compromising your password. But that also happens at home with your financial information, with your phone. IT is calling you, or you get that text message. You shouldn't be clicking on those links, right? Mm-hmm. That's very important. So awareness is important, and constant awareness. There's another form of awareness is, do you have all the alerts set up on your bank accounts when the administrator accounts in your business are changing passwords, you should be alerted about that. And if you're not getting alerts about that, you should. So those are just some simple awareness things, right? The second thing is controls. This is the C in the ACT. What kind of controls do you have in place for your business, but in your life? The one that I like to tell everybody is if you're logging in with just a login and password, you've been compromised. Assume that. You should have what we call MFA.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to slow you down for a minute.
Yeah.
So tell me, say that again. So if I'm just using a username and password,
that's it. Assume that you're compromised, right? So, like for example, look at your Google or maybe your Facebook or your LinkedIn as examples.
Yeah.
You can log in with your login. Then obviously you're going to put in your password. But there's also this other thing which is called 2FA or MFA.
Yeah.
In other words, it's another factor of identification. That factor can be an app that gives you a passcode for like 60 seconds. And you put that in with your login and password. Then you know that you're secure when you log in.
Okay.
Right? That kind of security is good for you. It's also good for your business. So those are the kind of controls you should have in place. As a very powerful example, if you're not doing that, do that. Go to LinkedIn, go to all of your apps, go and make sure you're doing that.
So get two-factor identification set up on everything that you
possibly can.
Everything,
absolutely. Okay. Right. Another one that I like to tell people is have a password vault. Of course, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, right? But the way that you can also add security to that is, look, I have all my passwords in, let's say, my iPhone and my LastPass account through there. But again, you have a login, you have a long password in there. It's a passphrase. So, Jack and Jill went up the hill, star 135 exclamation mark. That could be a passphrase that you always remember.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you also have the one-time password, also known as MFA, where that passcode is changing every 60 seconds. Now, if you're getting a text message instead of a one-time password in an app, that's a bit riskier because text messages can be interpreted or intercepted. So you want to try to be that.
Because that seems to be the preferred method is like the Microsoft Authenticator or the Duo Mobile. Or
that's right.
One of those apps, and it has the revolving thing. But if you get a text message, can people intercept those? What's the point of avoiding that?
Yeah, the trick here is I can compromise your cell phone and the text messages you get. It's easier to do that.
Okay.
It's less easier for me to compromise that one-time password because it's only good for 60 seconds and it's coming from a source that you downloaded from the App Store. Okay. That you registered with your account. So it's a little bit harder to do that than it is that.
So it's the preferred way.
The preferred way, especially for your organization, you should have one standard app, and in your life, you should try to use one standard app, whether it's Google or whether it's Microsoft. Even LastPass has their own one-time password, right?
They do.
So that's the C, right? And then T is training. Are you running drills at home? Are you running drills in the office, right? If you got this text message, do you fool your family and send them a link to see what they would do, right? Or you get the link yourself, you take a picture. Hey, would you guys click on this? Yeah. Do your kids send you a text message? Hey, Dad, should we click on this because we got it? In your office, are you aware of how many phishing links are being sent to your office? Yeah. If you're not, you should be, because there should be a regular conversation that's happening about, hey, look, if you get this link and you don't know who it is, and even if you do know who it is, don't click on it. Yeah. Let's vet that, because maybe we shouldn't be clicking on links coming from people that we either know or don't know, and we don't know what it's going to do to our computers.
So you mean I shouldn't have entered all my account information on the Geek Squad that I got the email on?
Probably not. Probably not. Yeah. But let's talk about...
I'm not sure about the Geek Squad.
But wait a minute.
Why they use that.
Okay, so let's take this further. So that was my acronym, ACT, right?
Yeah.
But now let's talk about, okay, so what happens if you did enter all your information, right?
Okay.
So let's say you clicked on a place.
You press enter and you see that, you feel your stomach drop. You're like, ooh, wait, what happened?
Wait a minute. But you know what happens is a lot of people will click on that link and it looks... the AI right now is doing such a good job to copying the interface of a valid web page. And the English is so perfect that you can't tell that it's a different website or a different application. So it's important that if you actually went through that step and then you have that second guess, the first thing you should do is probably change your password, right? And one of the best ways to do that is if you have the app, like let's say on your iPhone, go and change it via the app. Sometimes if you go to a web page and you're not sure on your computer if it was compromised, you can go on your app and it's easier to change on there. If you go to the web page, make sure you're using one-time passwords, right? Because that'll protect you in that password change scenario.
Why is it different? If you do your app versus on a desktop?
Because it's for a web page, let's say you're on a Wi-Fi, let's say at Starbucks, and you're not using a secure VPN, which is the way you can put secure VPN software on your computer, and you can use the service also via service providers. But sometimes people can interpret or they could intercept the actual web page you're going to. And if they know that people come to Starbucks and a lot of people are going to the bank that's across the street to change the credentials or to do business with the bank, just giving you an example, then they could subvert the page. They can interpret what is coming from the bank. They could intercept the actual content, and they could fool you to thinking that you're interfacing with the bank. These are all scenarios that are very easy to create. The trick is we can't keep up with them, but we can develop good behaviors. And those behaviors are with a login and a password. That's one step. The next step is one-time password. So you shouldn't be interfacing with a website that's only asking you for a login and password. And if you do, you better not be exchanging very sensitive information with it. So
yeah, it seems like for all this stuff, at this stage in the game, the weak points are the humans. And in our interest in trusting others, we want to trust people. So
yes.
we need to trust people. We can't not trust everyone. We'll die. We'll literally just shrivel up in a paranoid coma. But at the same time, you have to have a healthy suspicion about everything that you're doing on a digital side.
Oh yes.
And then you've got to be extremely suspicious about all these requests. Or what I'm most like scared of is like the cloned voice, right? Because what are you going to do? Am I not going to put this podcast out there?
Yes.
And my voice, like after one sentence, probably could be taken by an AI bot, reformatted to say whatever it needs to say.
Oh, yes.
And then it could be then thereby used as a phone call cloned to any family member, and then they'll be compelled to do whatever because I'm a trusted family member.
Exactly.
So where does that? I mean, that hasn't sort of scaled up, maybe.
Sure.
I don't think yet.
Sure.
I haven't heard of a lot of. We hear about the potential of that, and it scares the hell out of me. I'll tell you.
No, and it's a valid thing. Now, there's good uses for this technology, right? There's, for example, the leader of Argentina. I think he spoke at the World Economic Forum, and he was just on Lex Friedman's podcast. And I think there was a technology he was using where there's almost real-time translation with the voice and tone of the speaker, but translating so that the English audience could understand it. And that's very powerful stuff. It has very interesting historical applications because you could apply it to any speech from the past from a foreign speaker, translate it, and you get the emotion. Let's say we're English speakers, right? You get the emotion and the tonation of that speaker as if that speaker was speaking in English. So there's wonderful positive applications like all technology.
Yeah.
The negative applications are
these sort of things, right?
These sort of things. So I would say, again, it comes back to behaviors, right? I went recently to a leadership training, and this concept of behaviors really resonated with me. And it's really behaviors. Any video, any email, any phone call that is requesting you to take an action should have a follow-on trust but verify step.
Yep.
Right?
By the user.
By the user, right? If you're asking me, hey, Bernardo, I need you, really urgent, I need you to, send me $20 or approve this, PO.
And this is someone you're talking about who you know. Right. So you naturally are going to have some degree of trust.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's a family member or something.
Sure.
What's the next steps if you get that request, even if it's from your child? Right.
So here's where secondary actions have to be put in place. So, when I grew up, there was this thing about code words, right? If so-and-so said, hey, your mom is going to meet you there, and she said to meet me over there, well, my mom would never have asked that. but she would probably put in a Spanish code word that had to do something with our upbringing, right? As an example, I'm just using that as an example. That applies to the real world in terms of business, in terms of our family. My daughter should not go somewhere unless I gave that person a code word, and that would never happen because I would not do that. If it's in a business and the CFO is asking to approve or the boss is asking to approve something, there should be a secondary step offline that is taken in order to validate that request.
How about even just like calling them? Just say, oh, I'm going to hang up now. And
Yeah.
I'm going to call you back.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, don't say it. Don't say it. Just do it.
Just do it. Okay.
Just do it. I actually got that. One of the security leaders in our company, he was, I got a text message from him. It was like, hey, man, I need this. I'm on a conference call right now. I need some gift cards real quick because I want to give it to this client. And I'm like, first of all, that violates our ethics processes, right? So that already was like, okay, that's weird. But I started playing because I almost immediately knew that it was somebody trying to phish me. We call that another type of phishing, right? And I said, well, yeah, no problem. I'll give it to you. Just tell me where to send it. And I started pulling on the thread here. What you really need to do in these scenarios is be more proactive. That person sends me a text, call them. Because that could be a false, spoofed phone that is sending me a text. So if I call them and I leave a voicemail and I call them again because maybe they're in a meeting, then they probably need to know that this is happening because their phone number is probably sending that same text message to a bunch of other people in that person's contacts. So you're only helping them. So don't feel bad that you're going to call them offline. You're actually helping them and letting them know, I think your phone's been compromised. You probably want to get in front of this and let everybody in your contacts know that if they're receiving this text, that it's not you, So
those are really, I think, helpful, especially in this day. I mean, I feel like I get so many texts from weird area codes asking for random stuff. We've all got these texts nowadays where it's like, hey, want to meet for dinner? Like, at least I'm getting those. I don't know. And I'm like, delete. I must have probably like 1,000 or more phone numbers blocked at this point. But they find all the extra numbers and they always get to me.
Yeah.
So and I'm sure it's happening to everyone.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is what the practice I have. I block more things, but the thing is, people who need to get to me, I always give them an extra way to get to me. Whether it's a colleague, a friend, if it's school, another parent, right? There's these different mechanisms. Right. So,
listen, we could talk about this one for a long time, but I think that it's important to make sure that, like you said, be vigilant of that second factor of confirmation.
Sure.
Trust but verify. And especially when you're asked to give up any kind of amount of information, account information, send money, wire money, all that stuff.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Validate in another
Trust
channel.
Verify.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
Exactly. So we'll see, but I think that also, coming from the healthcare space, I know some of the work that you've done has been in healthcare. There's also the aspect of our medical data. I see even now, with the 23andMe thing, where they're going out of business. So now everyone's like, you probably should just tell them to delete your data, and who knows if they'll even do it. So it's really hard to know what to trust anymore. That's why I never did it. I was like, I don't know what these people are going to do with my data. It's outside of the protection of HIPAA, and that's even more concerning. But, what is another layer of concern that we need to be thinking of with respect to HIPAA or does,
it's tricky because as a individual, I assume as a former cybersecurity leader, I also was an executive responsible for cybersecurity for various businesses. And one time I was also responsible for a lot of PHI when I was a CISO at NYU. And I was very concerned about people's personal data, yet at the same time, I have to be ready to provide those individuals protection and other mechanisms to recover that data or to at least them be alerted when that data is used against them. I would say that the most important thing for this is for us to always assume that the data that we put out there is going to be compromised. If we work with that premise in mind, then what should we do? If we know our data, our health data is going to be compromised, if it's psychological data, if it's health data, what story, what corroboration will we have so that our careers, our personal reputations are protected in the event that they're used, one, against us, because there are scenarios where individuals have been blackmailed. This is off corporate, but this is in my personal experience and people that I know, that people have been blackmailed because their personal health data has been used against them. It could go that dark. So in some respects, you can't be paranoid and always think that's going to happen to you. But at the same time, you should say like for your credit card data, for example, if it's compromised, we get credit protection. For your health data, you should have some type of protection like that. At least in my case, you just have to have a narrative ready if your personal data is compromised that way. Now, in terms of a health organization, everybody has to comply with HIPAA. Everybody has to ensure that they're protecting the data adequately. What can an organization do there, right? In that case, we're talking about layers of security again, right? And I can get into that. I can go at length to talk about that. But I think, you always have to assume your data is going to get compromised. You just
assume if it's out there.
It really is. Now, as an organization, we become liable if our customers and our patients' data is exposed. In some cases, I've seen health organizations not be too concerned about that. Like, for example, a hospital. Are they concerned about your data, or are they concerned that if you're in the hospital, they can provide you the service? At that moment, this is the most important concern.
That's the thing. You can't be in the doctor's office, like giving half information, worried about the security of your information if you're just looking to get better. And so it kind of just, there's a certain element of, I want to say it is what it is, but I mean, look at Change Healthcare. I mean, you've got basically the clearinghouse that, by the way, every insurance company essentially uses in some turn of their transaction. All of their data compromised. That means all of our health data essentially is compromised. All of it. I mean, I know that they say it's 100 million. It's everyone. I mean, it's not the Change Healthcare. It's the local hospital. It's they're all getting compromised, and there's a lot of security they put in place. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's overwhelming amounts of cyber attacks that they're constantly every day facing from overseas and other places. And it's very lucrative.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, these guys pay the ransom too.
Yeah. And that's
right. They negotiate with the terrorists. Like
in the case of Change Healthcare, this is all public information. It was something like $20 million in terms of the ransom that was paid. Right. And the problem was that in that situation, they paid one affiliate, which is one of the entities involved in the actual compromise. But then there was another affiliate that was like, wait a minute. We didn't get our cut because there were two parties involved. And now the question is, are you going to pay them also? And it gets very messy.
Is that one of those things too, like they have the data and they say, pay us and we'll give it back to you. But then they still have it.
Yeah, so there's two things.
They still have it.
So there's
they keep milking you for it.
Well, there's two things. One is your data is encrypted and you can't get to it and use it. That's one. But the other aspect is, okay, we have the data, but you have to pay us a certain amount for us not to release it. And you're hoping in some respects that there's honor amongst thieves, because if there isn't...
You're trusting the thieves.
Well, in some respects,
just ripped you off.
There's a lot of trust involved, because if they don't act with integrity, at least in these extortions, then their industry takes a hit.
So it's their own industry. They have a moral code of ethics.
Right. So there's
cyber...
This is but this goes back to cops and robbers since the beginning of time, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to really believe the threat if they don't follow through with the threat? But how are you going to believe the protection if they don't follow through with the protection, right? This is more related to the mob days. This is more recent organized crime, but this is organized crime also.
Yeah.
So the threat and the protection are just as important, because you're scared of one because you know what'll happen, but you're hopeful for the other, because you hope that when you pay that you get the protection, right? It goes back to fundamentals. This is very
fundamental.
These are very
crime.
Fundamentals.
It's very, very. You could just keep going in circles with this because it's tough. But I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about you coming on here and asking some questions, and I'm like, you see, It's like police officers, right? They see the worst of the worst. Like no one calls the police when things are going great.
Yep.
I'm having a good day. I'm not calling the cops. You're seeing people at their worst, things happening at their worst. You're seeing, and you're kind of in that way, from a cyber perspective, you're seeing the worst things happening to people getting exploited from a cyber perspective. Does that kind of infect your mind in some ways? Like, cause sometimes like you start to get I would probably get paranoid just logging into my, Amazon account, like let alone.
It's interesting because one person's paranoia is just another person's high standard. I look at it that way because I know the consequence of, to Jocko's point, discipline is freedom. So a certain level of discipline in my security practices gives me freedom. I've been hacked before. Credit card in my pocket, used it at a gas station when I was on a business trip in Jersey. I'm in New York City. Next thing you know, my credit card's being used, even though it's in my pocket, in a grocery store. Went to the grocery store as soon as I humanly could, found out from the camera that it was a person with a cap on that was swiping multiple times. But what they did was they copied the magnetic strip information onto their plastic card, and they were able to use it to buy gift cards and baby formula and stuff like that.
Not
right?
baby oil.
that's a different podcast and a different case. Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure. I almost just intersect.
Nice.
Okay.
But this is the reality of cyber, in that when I experienced that and I knew that they could take my information, they could take my bank account and all of that, I got scared. And I started realizing that if I could do this for companies, I could do this on a smaller scale for my family. Mm-hmm. Heck, when I first met my wife, she'll laugh about this, but the password strength was not very strong.
I see.
Right. The password strength is much stronger and much better.
1, 2, 3, 4?
It could be. Could have been.
Could have been.
Reported allegedly. Allegedly.
I assume it's been changed. That's why I say it.
Exactly. Yeah. So in other words, when you experience trauma, sometimes that trauma informs your new behavior, but it becomes part of your habits and your new behaviors. And those are new standards, right? Mm-hmm. Like waking up in the morning and working out. We don't all do it. It could help us all if we did more of that. Mm-hmm. Other people would say, man, you're crazy. I'd rather just sleep in every day, right? But discipline is freedom in some respects.
I want to ask you that question, though. What do you think? What's your opinion? I agree with the discipline leads to freedom, and freedom's an interesting concept.
Yes.
But if you go to bed at midnight, are you better off sleeping till 7 or getting up at 5 and working out?
Well, it depends. If you go to sleep at midnight every day and wake up at 5 in the morning, probably not. Most people are not wired that way.
Yeah.
You probably know this better than I do. You've got me.
I want to know your opinion.
No, in my opinion, no. I know. So it depends, right?
Because there's a lot of people who do that. And I'm in a different camp. I think sleep is king. So
yes.
It's on me to go to bed earlier. If
Sure.
I want to get up early for working out. I'm like an afternoon workout guy.
Sure.
As much as I've done it before, where I've been pretty disciplined about getting up and doing some working out, but eventually it just goes away, and then I just really have to go back to the afternoon. But I don't know. I'm a sleep is king guy.
Dude, and that's the most important thing we can do because of the, you look at the logic of the washing out toxins in the brain and making sure the full, I told this to my daughter, you want to make sure that if you're working hard to study, that you're working hard to drain that into your memory. And if you're not going through your 2 and ideally your 3 REM cycles, you're not maximizing how much retention you have of the material you consumed the night before. Now, you can get away with doing that 1 or 2 nights, but if you're doing it successively, you're just wasting your time studying, essentially. And you're just going to have short-term retention, no long-term retention. Now, in the nature of my life, if I don't work out in the morning, if I don't get the blood flowing in the morning, it sets the tone at the pace at which I operate all day long.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense too.
So I'm recognizing that I could get that extra sleep, but then my productivity may be impacted.
You haven't fired up the engine.
I haven't, right? And these synapses need firing up. Yeah, well, totally.
So the solution, like all solutions, is further upstream, which is just going to bed earlier. So you can
you're absolutely right.
7-8 hours.
Yes.
And wake up early and work out and fire up the engines and then on and on and on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the key. I think the key to life is going to bed early.
It is. I agree with you. We're made to go to bed earlier.
It is. It's the answer, and I'm still.
Yes.
It's always elusive. I go through phases where I'm good, and then it just sort of degrades, and then I go into bad spirals. But
Well, how can you do that so consistently if your dad, you have your business, your husband, you're doing all of these things, and then what about you and your time? And then maybe you need to decompress a little bit.
You know what it is?
It's you feel like you run out of day.
It's when midweek, right?
Yeah.
Our days are packed with like the stress, a lot of things to do.
Yes.
That's work. It's hard work, and
Yep.
we know the value of that. However, there's stress involved and stuff. And when you come home, you want to extend that ability to just chill, just relax. And if you go to bed, it sort of ends, right?
Yes.
Even though it's important, it's better for you.
Yes.
And in the morning, you'll be like, oh my God, I'm so glad I went to bed
Yes.
early. You just want to have that evening kind of just roll on. You're having a good time. So unless I'm really, really exhausted, I usually kind of sometimes push it. Another episode, maybe one more episode.
Yes.
I find my wife's doing that a lot too. I'm like, we got to go to bed. We got to go to bed. Let's go to bed.
Let's go.
And we're like into the next episode.
Yeah, I know. Because there's so
Usually
much
wins.
good stuff actually lately that's come up that it has become a distraction. And maybe that's the problem. Distractions. The distractions that we have are making it even harder to stick to that routine, right?
Yeah. I actually went and
Yeah.
bought, speaking of, trying to wind down, because I'm not a guy who winds down easy.
Yes.
I got the whoop. So I can see how my stress takes a little while, even when I'm sleeping,
Yes.
to like get down to like where it should be.
Yes.
Whereas probably if we looked at other people's, they go right down to the bottom.
Yes.
That's probably why at times I've had trouble getting to bed. A lot of it's just anxiety or thinking, and the more you think about needing to go to sleep, the harder it is.
Yeah.
So I'll get into those loops, and I've done that. It's been a problem in the past. So, getting into that routine is so important. It's so important.
Yes.
And it's so helpful for your health, for everything about setting up. It's like setting the table.
Yes.
For the next day.
Yes.
I don't know.
This is the topic of leadership. How do you lead change in the home so that over time everybody is bought in, or mostly everybody is bought in to these routines?
Yeah.
This is similar to leadership at work and leadership, in our different areas. But this is an area where leadership starts to becomes a dominant topic, at least in my mind.
Well,
right.
Leadership, and that's the educational part about being disciplined.
Yes.
Which leads you to the ultimate freedom, right? The less you know,
yes,
and the less you control about the things that you can control, and even control is maybe
a perception.
It's a perception because we
yeah.
probably don't control anywhere near as what we think we control.
That's right.
But we try to influence things.
Yes.
It's probably the closest we get to any real control.
Yes.
But the more the more control or the more influence you can have over your day-to-day decisions about health, about structuring your day, exercise, routines.
Yes.
The more it opens up your mind to do other things, it opens your life, it gives it more possibilities. That's
right.
the freedom.
Yep. That's it.
Right?
That's it.
And the more you can, and as fathers, and we've talked about this, the more you can help impart that, not force anyone to do, because they don't, certainly when you tell kids what to do, that's the surest way to tell
them not to do it. Yes, exactly.
So, but the more you can model it.
Yeah.
And you tell them, they don't listen, and then you model it.
Yes.
And then they start, like when you're not there, they'll do it.
Yes.
And then
yes.
And then they realize, wow, that this works.
Yes.
And then now they're empowered to do it themselves, and then they'll go tell their friends, and then they're setting the tone for their own community and social circles. So
correct.
That helps, I think, set the stage for, growth at an early and young age.
Absolutely.
Right? For young kids, by the way, who are not too young to do this, to be disciplined and to be healthy and to think of the world as an opportunity for service to others.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Not just a place of me, how can I enjoy the day?
Yes.
Scroll through social media.
Oh, yes.
Get anxious and depressed, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's too easy to go that route. You need to work on the discipline and the routines.
Yes.
And then they feel less stressed. By the way, speaking of which, this is not this is an analogy for we were talking about with my dog.
Uh-huh.
Remember I was telling you about my dog in New York City.
Yes.
She was disciplined.
Yes.
She would be in the crate from, 6 a.m.
Yes.
We were in residency, 6 a.m. I lived in an apartment.
Yes.
My wife, 6 a.m. to 12 noon.
Yes.
Dog would be in the crate. Understood that was that time.
Mm-hmm,
At 12 noon to 1, she'd go for a walk. She'd go to the dog park. She'd come back. From 1 o'clock to, I don't know, 6, 7, depend on the day.
Yes.
We'd come home. We'd take her for a walk. We'd run her out at the dog park. She'd come home. She'd eat her food. She was a happy dog, an energetic, happy dog. When we moved to the suburbs, when she was about 5 or 6, she had the run of the house. This is great. The dog has freedom. Freedom, right? The dog started getting anxious. She started getting almost like angry. You could tell she was tight, wound tight. We'd let her out in the yard, full freedom.
Yes.
There wasn't a structure to her day.
Yes.
And the dog started, she wanted to have more structure and basically imparted discipline on her day. It was more relieving to her. That's what dogs like, leashes.
Yes.
They don't know what to do off leash. So.
Wow. Yeah. You bring up an interesting topic because I think about neurotypical folks that I work with or serve. And I think about the fact that usually structure helps them be their optimal self. And as I apply that to either myself, to my clients, I am motivated to be more structured because I feel like I behave better. But also to your point about asking me, going back to your original question around how do you not let, all this cyber and all this crazy stuff up. I am motivated by being structured so that I don't have to, so I have the freedom to not have to be compromised. And if I am compromised, I know what to do. But most so I'm modeling behavior that I want my wife and my kids to model. And that inspires me to be structured, to be more disciplined, which there in terms gives me freedom and then gives me confidence that they know what to do in the event that there's a situation. So I think these threads of behaviors that we see in us, that we see in our pets, that we see in people who are versus those who are not structured. Now, there are people who are creatives, right? And they're not structured, and perhaps they thrive in that space. But ultimately, you have to, as the Greeks say, know thyself.
But even like if you feel like someone's not structured, they probably have a freeform structure.
That's a great point too, because I have seen creatives that they say, no, I just let it flow. But when you study them and observe them, and
there's a routine.
There's a routine, and we, especially when we're structured, we observe it. But there's a space in where their genius creates things, and they create things that is their gift, and there's definitely a structure to it. But
our brains are structured, right? So even like artists will be like, I'm in the shower and that's when I do my thing.
Yeah,
that's structure.
Totally.
It's not at a desk at like 10 a.m.
Yes,
like it just happens. Our bodies are connected to God, right? We're getting these wavelengths, these vibrations, and they happen at different in different settings in our own lives.
Oh,
and
yes.
So how does that flow through us? Each individual is different.
I know.
Right?
I know. I think, and to your point, I think we're all connected in some respects. Somebody's positive energy will make me feel positive. Somebody's negative energy will impact how I behave and how I feel. And therein lies how I impact the day and how that, how those people behave, so forth and so on. So there's something to be said around the people we spend time around, how we behave and how we act, how we impact the outcomes that we want. I say this, we talk about this with our sons. Who are the coaches? What are the teams that they should be in order to really create the environments where they can be their best selves?
Yeah.
Right. And whether we're talking about leadership or parenting or trying to put our kids in the right environment, what do we do to create the right structure or at least set the conditions for these folks to thrive?
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of that.
Yeah. We're all connected, and the people around us are more connected to us than anyone else. And again, and that's the idea we were talking earlier about, we're doing some we had a conversation in the office about, how important community is.
Yes.
Right. And it's when you're isolated, right? What did COVID do, right? It isolated people.
Yeah.
You know, for good reason at the time. And now, of course, we forget how bad COVID was, and we're like, at isolation, we should have never had it, but people were dying.
Yeah.
So there was no right approach. There was just approaches.
Correct.
But what happened as a residue of that, obviously, is that there's a reason why we were all in an office together, while we were having meetings, there was a reason for that. Otherwise, we would have all just been working from home for ages. Technology expedites that. It makes it easier, but it's been around.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why it wasn't being used that way. And now, you know, not just the community of like being on the phone or being on a Zoom, but being in person, there's something about that physical, three-dimensional, body heat, whatever it may be, vibration of the space.
Sure.
However you want to describe it, there's a value to that. That elevates. And by the way, that's why people wanted to get back to in-person dining.
Yes.
As simple as that.
Breaking bread.
What was that all about, man?
Yeah. Yes.
Dining. But we realized it's actually very important.
The breaking of the bread, you know, metaphor is such an important thing. I think that's also why, unfortunately, we have such a mental health crisis. We feel disconnected. So there's something that's amiss. Something is missing. Connection is missing. Whatever that connection is.
We've never been more interconnected.
Yeah.
And we've also never been more disconnected.
Oh my gosh. You said it so perfectly. You said it so perfectly. Because
when you said that, I was like,
that's a great point. We're connected, but we're not truly connected in the way we were designed, however that is, to be connected.
We're interconnected through social media, through digitally connected, and we're more disconnected from actually knowing each other. We don't know. You know, yes, I can get high-level overviews or curated pictures of people's day-to-day or updates. Those are all positives.
That's right.
But you can't have that as a substitute for true, genuine relationships.
Yep.
And, you know, I think without, you know, I would say inadvertently, we kind of decided, we've done this a lot of different ways in our ways of life.
Yep.
But social media is the obvious one. It's like kids are at school, never disconnected,
right?
But also never connected because they're all on their phones. You know, and by the way, and this is an indictment of all of our kids, mine included, when we were watching that movie, they have a hard time watching a movie. They're just connecting.
I know. The
ability. Did you see that?
I saw that. The ability to focus.
And the ability to focus, which by the way, when we have a conversation, we have to focus. We can't be like sitting like here.
This. I know. This is so important.
And even I was like, okay, movie's getting a little slow.
Yeah.
You know, it's wild.
Oh, yes.
So the forces we're up against, and our kids are especially up against, are different. We've come from so far from where we are.
Oh, yeah.
And ironically, I think even our kids, we think, they're in it now. We're not even in it yet.
I think the concept that I've loved from you and your wife and what you've introduced us to is this concept of young kids and the junior youth leadership concept. Their ability, young kids that are able to work in small groups to build a better community.
Yes.
Building this, because we've always talked about, look, if the zombies do come up and they all get hit by COVID and then the grid goes down and then there's no access to money and all of this happens either individually or at the same time, what we will need are people who know how to build communities back up. And those skill sets, and somehow, because the schools are not doing it by themselves, right? So as parents and community members, we need to ensure that our kids are learning those skill sets.
Yeah.
And I think that's a differentiator that we're very thankful to be a part of, because we think that's going to be a big difference maker in the students of tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow, that they have those supplemental connection skills on how to connect with everybody else and how to build everybody else up.
Yes.
Where each one teaches one and then that one is able to grow the other one. Since that's sorely lacking, I also think, like Jocko says, good opportunity for our boys and girls to step up and be different, because the academic is only one intelligence and these colleges are not always going to teach them that.
Well, schools, you know, schools will, especially high school, grade school, everything will teach you math, science, to the extent that they can. I will say, actually, I had a patient the other day who mentioned that, something about a character development program they were working on in the school, which I thought was great.
Yes.
Which kind of goes to like the junior spiritual empowerment program, which you referenced.
Yes.
Which are is so important because it takes kids age of 12 to 15.
Yes.
That's an age, that's middle school age, right? That's an age where we kind of are like, oh, these kids, they're going through puberty, they're having the hard time, and they are.
Yes.
However, the potential is for them to drop or to raise. Yes. And depending on how they're influenced and the kids around them and the community and the structure they're given.
Yes.
Or not.
True.
Will allow them to either rise or fall.
Yeah.
And then they spend the next few years trying to come out of that and be developing or continue on a higher level path. And that's what the goal or the objective of the Junior Spiritual Empowerment Program, which is, it's a Baha'i-based program, which, really it's a Baha'i-inspired thing, but it's inspiring understanding that the teachings of God are integrally related to our ability to succeed in the world with each other.
Yes.
And also integrally related to that program is the necessity of performing service. And we see this with all sorts of faith-based and non-governmental organizations.
Yes.
They're service-oriented.
Yes.
Right? And if you're doing service for others, that's like going to give you the most satisfaction in life.
Yes.
May not make you the richest.
Sure.
From a financial, economic perspective, but you're doing God's work.
Well, at the same time, it may make you the richest, right?
It may make you
because at the same time, if I go back to this book, one of my favorite books, Think and Grow Rich, right? You have to first think, then grow, and rich doesn't always translate to money, but it can.
Yeah.
Right. I like it because we are of a different faith. And the program doesn't impose a dominant faith program. It's not a cult. It's not only our faith is right. It's a matter of leveraging common principles of a higher being. And in fact, I think it's beautiful, and we need more of that in our society. And while one can respect the fact that maybe I don't believe in God, or others may have, they may be atheists or others, and we can respect that. I think it's important to still realize that there's something bigger at play.
They're common, even if you don't recognize, God, you say, I don't believe in God, there are certain common characteristics that I think we'd all agree on would be an appropriate way to treat each other.
Absolutely.
And behave in society.
Those principles, that's it. Yes.
Yes. If we all worked, when I say all, I'm talking about every human being in the world, all work from at least a common basic set of principles.
Yes.
I think basically most problems would go away. And we could just consult in a more productive way than to fight out and fund political campaigns. Yes. Because there's nothing more profitable that to a media company or, all these different third parties than fighting.
Agreed.
Wars, political fights.
Yep. So true.
It's very profitable.
I know.
And it requires dissent and bitter disagreement, which only exists when you don't recognize the commonality of your brother and sister and your neighbor and the same being said for the people of another country overseas, that they're having the same struggles economically, socially. It's all the same. We all just operate basically through the same set of social interactions.
Now, I'm going to flip the script a little bit here. So we've talked about community, God, metaphysics in some respects, right? The interconnectedness of all things and how the vibration of that affects each other. Now, let's talk about the optimal performance of the individual. And I want to throw this out. I think we can use AI and technology to make us the best individual.
Yeah.
Leave the technology to the side so that we can then connect with each other and bring that wisdom, that knowledge, that practice to engage. What is your thoughts about that type of daily behavior for a person what do you feel is the optimal relationship with a technology like AI for personal development? Do you feel like that would be?
You're just prompting me because that's a great question for you.
No,
You're
but I
the
want to know your perspective, because people can imagine me and cyber and AI. We can get to that, but I want to see your perspective.
No. But I know enough about your approach.
Yeah.
That I don't know enough about it, but
Yeah.
I know you are a devotee,
Sure.
early adopter.
Sure.
We'll call it, of AI in your personal life. So.
Yeah.
I'm not an early adopter as much. I have used it more and more, I'd say probably. Sure. You'd see the chart going up and up. Every question starts to be, ask ChatGPT. And I think we're all like that. We're all we're all on a path of, relying even on ChatGPT and other large language models to make our lives more efficient.
Yes.
And maybe give us ideas we didn't have that make us better at the things we do. So I think it's something we need to embrace.
Sure.
There's always going to be and I think this is what we started with the conversation with on cybersecurity is like, you always think the worst. Right. Oh my God, like how bad is this? Well, okay, but here's how it can be good. Here's how cloning voices can be used for good. And I think there is, kind of like the virus, right? Yes. It starts off very, very with high mortality rates, and then it kind of dies down, whittles down, and becomes innocuous and sort of, I don't want to say innocuous, but it's not thought of the same way.
Exactly.
And it's, but in some ways, technology, the internet, right? It all starts in the defense department.
Sure.
Right. It all starts as like
DARPA, that kind of stuff.
DARPA. Yeah, it starts off as like a warfare tool.
Yes, yes.
And then it becomes integral to your ability to interact with the world.
Yes.
Normally for society. So I think AI in a lot of ways will just become that, and we're going through that transition of thinking this is going to end humanity as we know it, to the point where we're like, this is the only way humanity can exist now, because it's like so helpful.
Yes.
So I haven't used it in like a day-to-day, more of kind of like here's a problem for today. I might it even helps like write letters sometimes, gets me like 60% of the way there.
Beautiful. Yes. Beautiful.
And then I'll kind of adapt and what have you. So it's a good startup.
Absolutely.
I also wonder how much of that's atrophying my own brain to some extent, but I don't know. It's going to be there.
Well, that's not what the thing you're great at. The thing you're great at is fixing humans, right? So why should you be spending cycles trying to train that muscle?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Why waste time? You only have so much time in
There's only so much time left, right?
True.
So I think that's a beautiful thing you're using it like that.
Fair enough.
How do you feel about how the kids and the family use it?
I know my wife has used it in a kind of a similar way that I have.
Yeah.
She's starting to outsource a lot lot of
we may be out of jobs soon.
Questions to me. She doesn't ask me anymore. She just asks Chat.
We're out of work soon, man.
She's got her other husband, Chat.
Yes.
But I think it's helpful. It gets me off the hook sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just say, don't ask me, ask ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of great things that might be obvious or might be hiding in plain sight. Like, oh my God, of course.
Yes.
Right? And, my kids, I don't know. They may use it more than I realize they use it. But, we try to block it because I think that I do want kids to, learn how to use it.
I know.
But I also want kids to develop their brains first.
Yes.
We've had the opportunity to develop our brains to do it by ourselves. Mm-hmm. And now we have like an engine to move you. It's like the electric bike.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I used to know how to ride a bike with my legs.
That's right.
Yes. Now it's like the electric bike. You don't even need to. My kids are asking for electric bikes. I'm like, you're cutting your body out of the situation. So I don't know how much we're cutting our minds out of the situation, and to what extent do you want them? Is it kind of like social media? You want them to come into it like later on in their development, so they can develop some basics of thought process, critical thinking, so they're not outsourcing, because you're skipping steps of thinking.
No, what you're talking about there really catches my attention, though, because you're highlighting the fact of something that I've talked to our kids a lot, which is this concept of critical thinking. Critical thinking, and then, different mental models. Thinking about, for example, if you're going to think in first principles, but you don't understand the subject matter of physics and biochemistry and so forth and so on, is that information you would have gained if you took the time to learn it versus just getting the answers from, AI? Do you know how to write? If you don't know how to write, then you may not know how to gather your thoughts. If you don't know how to gather your thoughts, then you don't know how to think. And if you don't know how to think, you don't know how to communicate effectively. And therefore, you can't lead effectively. Right. So I don't like the idea, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't like the idea of, because I do encourage the kids to use a lot of AI, but I'm not engaging with them enough to see how much they're doing critical thinking, critical writing, and critical debating, right? Those kind of essential skills that are required, that if we have them, it's okay. But if they haven't developed them, it's not okay.
That's the thing, is
that concerns me, actually.
I don't want to be the, negative Nancy about new technology. I think it's important to see where you can integrate it and help it enhance your ability to thrive and enhance, as adults, our ability to, our ability to work efficiently and get things done and organize things at much higher levels than we ever could on our own even.
Yep.
But it goes back to social media. Would you give a 5-year-old Instagram?
Hope not.
Or Snapchat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You get asked, for it every day, and you try to delay it as long as possible. Why?
Yeah.
Because you don't want that. There's certain things that social media has taught me that I think it's been integrally important for.
Yep.
That have at least stimulated more thoughts. But so that's a positive.
Yeah.
But also we catch ourselves diving in just in these scroll holes, just killing time, just dopamine bathing, right?
Ooh,
and
I know.
That's the downside.
Yes.
And you don't want them doing that early on in their lives, because they're going to skip through critical developmental processes the same way they were skipping over developmental processes sitting at home during COVID on a laptop with headphones.
That's right.
It's no different. So I that's where I think some of these, and I don't think that government regulations are ever the answer necessarily, but I think government sort of is a surrogate for community.
Yep.
When community can't agree, it sort of just comes down with the rules. And sometimes at least you need somewhere to start. And so is there some general guidelines that we have to come up with as a society now that this has been rolled out upon us for the last year and a half, 2 years? Yep. And so, I think probably we need to start thinking more about it. We're not going to know the detrimental impact it has on our kids for 5 to 10 years. And then we're going to be like, oh my God, when we introduced ChatGPT.
That was a problem, right? Yeah.
That was a huge problem.
I think that movie, Social Dilemma, if you haven't seen it, you must see it. Like Social Dilemma, we saw that during COVID. It was mind blowing. I'll tell you, the way I use ChatGPT is as a coach.
Okay.
So for example, I'm helping a young man do a career change. He's in his 40s. If I didn't get that right, it's early 40s. He has a newborn and a wife, and he's looking to make a career change.
Okay.
And one of the things that I said was, we were talking, and then I'm like, wait a minute, let's ask ChatGPT a question. And I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially what I said was, first you got to tell the ChatGPT, or you got to tell to play a role. So you are a cybersecurity coach, and I need you to tell me how to help me become the best cybersecurity professional possible. In that stead, I would like for you to map out over the next year, what is the sequence and what is the schedule and what are the daily routines that I should engage in when I have a full-time job so that I can continuously learn about cybersecurity. Further, I would like for you to also frame it within the context of the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell, so that I could actually tell the story of how I did this and write a book and leave it for my child. And that was the question. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close to what I asked. We got like a 4 or 5 page response, and I was doing this real time over Zoom. Can you think about taking all of my experience and coaching somebody over a 6-month period versus taking 5 minutes to do this on Zoom with a person, and now just attach a regular cadence of follow-up with this individual who is motivated to change his life by leveraging cybersecurity? Like, this just triplicated the effectiveness of me as a coach or as a mentor helping somebody else. But it can also help me in that regard, right? And if we can use AI like that for ourselves, you got to be careful how personal you get, because you got to remember all this stuff to cybersecurity is going out there. But ultimately, it's going to learn all the kind of questions. And it's every month, it's really good to ask your AI the following question. Notice how I said your AI, because eventually you're going to have your robot, right? It'll become affordable in like 10 years maybe, right? And you're going to ask your AI the following question every month. What do you know? What can you tell me about me that I probably don't know about myself? I heard this on a podcast the other day. And I'm like, that's an intelligent question. And I did it. And, there was nothing too surprising yet. But I'm realizing that in a couple of months, there's going to be blind sides that I'm not picking up on.
Wow.
That the AI may be. So
I think I did that. I think I said the same. I probably saw the same post.
Yeah.
And
Wait, you're the one actually that sent me the post.
Did I send it to you?
You sent me the post.
Okay.
And I acted on it.
Yeah.
And I
asked it that question about yourself.
No, it wasn't anything too revealing, but I could tell that the deviation between what it's starting to tell about me now and at the frequency that I'm increasing using it is going to probably start to tell me things that are blind sides to me, right? Probably in a couple of months. So you're the one who sent it to me. Yeah, it was a podcast clip from an Instagram, and then you sent me that clip, and then I did that. Yeah.
It was, I did it. It was pretty good. It got pretty good. It was still pretty much a general overview, but I haven't used it quite as much as you have, day to day.
Yes.
By the way, did you know, like the whole, talk about the carbon footprint, like how much energy goes into each search. Yes. It's like 20x times a Google search.
Yes.
Every time you search something.
Yes.
Kind of back of my head think of that, but I'm like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna eventually have to have nuclear plants just hooked up to these data farms, right?
That'd be great.
These chip farms.
That'd be great. Why not?
I think
it's a good thing.
By the way, I do think that, and I will say that one of the things that politics aside, I think that we are seeing all this stuff about climate change and stuff. We feel it. We know things are changing, not for the better for most of us. And, that wasn't really discussed in politics. It kind of almost has become like we've acquiesced to it, which is sad for me. But I do think that one of the positive things that'll come out of this is it'll force us to get back into the nuclear power debate because, I think we were all so traumatized by the nuclear disasters, but the technology has gotten to the point where, by the way, it all dovetails together because you don't have to worry about nuclear power and the nuclear weapons if we're not fighting with each other. If we're not fighting with each other, we can all construct societies that have clean nuclear energy with zero carbon emissions.
Correct.
Power your data AI center. Who cares? Power your house. Power your car. It literally is probably the solution, right? I mean, solar and wind is fine, but can't do it all.
Yes.
Nuclear is like, it's the solution, realistically, unless we come up with fusion or...
I think you're completely right. I'm on board. I don't think it's the war thing that has scared people. I think it was a 3 Mile Island. Yeah. It was the Russian, right? The Russian, there
was Chernobyl.
The Chernobyl, I'm sorry.
Chernobyl. The whole thing.
Yeah, that affected everybody, right? And that's when we saw a dip in nuclear scientists and so forth and all that from that point.
Yeah. And then Fukushima.
Fukushima, that's another one, right?
Yeah. But those were all supposedly all older designs that were flawed.
Yep.
But they were still online producing. So that, of course.
And they were large scale too. If they're smaller scale, it wouldn't be as bad, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the problem is nothing's without downside and radiation people are scared of. But the reality is like, what are we going to do? But that's an interesting thing coming.
I think it's good.
So we'll see where that goes.
Yes.
Pretty soon the only fossil fuel will be Elon's rockets going up every 5 seconds.
I'm just making sure I can get my passport for Mars.
You're getting a ride to
getting
Mars?
a passport of Mars.
We'll see if we see the surface of Mars. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming by. And,
thank you, man. This has been a really good
discussion. We could probably keep going for another couple hours. We're getting to hour 3.
Yeah, let's go.
We're gonna keep it going. I'm not that popular yet. We'll get a little more viewership, and then we're going to go 3 hours. But
yes.
But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. These are really important topics. So
yes, sir.
We got to do it again soon.
You got it, man. Thank you, man. Thank you, man.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Cool. How'd that go? Man, we talk.
That was an hour.